A method is a way to perform some task. Similarly, the method in Java is a collection of instructions that performs a specific task. It provides the reusability of code. We can also easily modify code using methods. That is, the method can be described as a collection of instructions that can perform a specific task. Why we require method? This collection of instructions that is called as method is required in Java. It is because if we want to replicate the same set of instructions at some place else, we can easily replicate it without using or without a need to write the full code again just by using the method. We can also easily modify this code using methods. So now you can see in this diagram over here, the method header consists of 4 parts: access specifier, return type, method name, parameter list. Access specifier defines if the method is public, private, protected, or default. That is, the scope and the lifetime and the accessibility of a method depends on the access specifier. Second is the return type. The return type can be an integer, it can be float, it can be double, anything which we want to return. Similarly, we have the method name and we have the parameter list, and then we have the method body and the method signature. So now, in order to define the definition of a method is a block of code or collection of statements or a set of code grouped together to perform a certain task or operation. It is used to achieve the reusability of code. We write a method once and use it many times. We do not require to write the code again and again. It also provides the easy modification and readability of code just by adding or removing a chunk of code. The method is executed only when we call it or invoke it. That is the second important part of a method. We need to call or invoke the method in order to run it. The most important method in Java is the main method. We already saw the method declaration, how method declaration can be done. Next is method signature. So the default or the different access specifiers which can be used are public, private, protected, and default. Public is the method is accessible by all the classes when we use public specifier. Private, when we use a private access specifier, the method is accessible only in the class in which it is defined. Protected, when we use protected access specifier, the method is accessible within the same package or subclasses in a different package. Now the subclasses need to inherit the parent class, then only the protected modifier will work. Default, when we do not use any access specifier in the method declaration, Java uses default access specifier by default. It is visible only from the same package only. The return type. Return type is a data type that the method returns. It may have a primitive data type, object, collection, void, etc. If the method does not return anything, we need to use a void keyword. Method name. It is a unique name that is used to define the name of a method. It must be corresponding to the functionality of the method. Suppose if we are creating a method for subtraction of two numbers, the method name must be subtraction. Parameter list. It is a list of parameters separated by a comma and enclosed in the pair of parentheses. Method body. It is a part of the method declaration. So now you can see the 4 different parts: the return type, the method name, the parameter list, and the method body. Few important points you need to remember over here is the return data type. The return data type should specifically match with the return value of a method. If I am returning an integer, the return type should be integer. If I am returning a float, the return type should be float. Likewise. Method name. There are some rules we need to follow while naming a method, but remember, try to name it as per the functionality of the method. If I'm doing or if I'm creating a method for division, then name it as division. If I'm creating a method for some other kind of arithmetic operation, name it on that. Parameter list. It is again a very important part of a method. The number and the parameters should be used inside the method body, should be declared along with the method header, and then we have the method body. Naming a method. There are different conventions which we need to follow for naming a method, as can be seen over here, that the method name must be a word and should always start with a lowercase. If the method name has more than two words, the first name must be a verb followed by adjective or noun. In the multi-word method, the first letter of each word must be in uppercase except the first word. So the first word can never be in uppercase, it should always be in lowercase. Types of methods. There are predefined methods in Java and there are user-defined methods. Again, predefined methods are actually the built-in methods which can be directly used for our different operations. We can just directly use this method just by calling them in the program at any point. Some predefined methods are length, which is used to calculate the length, equals, that is to compare, again compare to, and sqrt for calculating the square root. Each and every predefined method is defined in a class, such as print is defined in the class java.io.print stream. Next is a very simple example to calculate the maximum value between two variables using a predefined method, that is math.max. Let us see how we will execute this program. Now you can see how we will define or how we will use the math.max function in order to create this program. So here we will be using the max function or the max method inside this program. Now the max function belongs to the math class. So already we have defined a public class and a public static void main function inside this. I'll just directly write system.out.println. You can write the maximum number is, and then you can write over here math. Since math is the class in which the method max belongs, 9,7. Let us now try to execute it. Yes, so now we are getting the maximum is 9. That is, the math.max will calculate the maximum value between the two variables. Now let us go to the next topic, that is a user-defined method. For a user-defined method, the method written by the user or the programmer is known as a user-defined method. These methods are modified according to the requirement. So the declaration of the method that we have seen in the previous slide will be used to create a user-defined method. Now let us see how we will create a user-defined method by programming. We'll go to the code part. We'll open a new project and then we will start our programming. So you can see over here, I have just now these are the commands for a public class and again for a static void main function. But in order to create or in order to use the method, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a user-defined method. Now in order to create a user-defined method, this method we will create method to know if the number is even or odd. Now for this we will take the input from user. After taking input from user, again in order to take input from the user, we will have to write import java.util.scanner. After that we will create a method of our own, that is a user-defined method. Now this method will be created By defining public means the method is accessible to all classes and packages. Static means that the method can be called without any object, and void means that it will not be returning any data type. Again, find even odd. Inside it, we will provide it a variable. After that, we will create the method body. Since this method is to know if the number is even and odd, so the instance of a class is known as static method. For a method that is relatable to the class, not the object of the class, that becomes a static method. This means a static method can be called without an object. But if we remove the static method, then we need to define an object to call the method. The advantage. What is the advantage of static method? The advantage is that we can call it without creating an object. Also, it can access the static data members and also change the value of it. The static data members can be accessed with static method. Also, it can be used to create an instance method. It is invoked by using the class name. The best example of a static method is the main method. The method which we have been using for each and every program is actually a static method. Let us go to the example once again to see how we can change a method from static to instance. Suppose if we are removing this variable static, then it becomes an instance method. How to call an instance method now? First of all, create an object. So what is the class name over here? Even, odd. What is the object name? So again, let us create the object. So again, we will define the class name, and then we have created an object over here, obj. After this, when you will use this, call this method, it needs to be called without object. But let us see how without an object, what error is given when we try to execute a static method. Now this is an error, a very important error over here, that is non-static method. What is a method name? Find even odd cannot be referenced from a static context. Since we remove the static keyword, we cannot reference it with a static context. So now again, when we put the object name and then when we try to run it, you can see our program will work for us. So this is how we have to see if a method is static or instance. Instance method, we have already discussed, it requires an object to be invoked or called. Again, the next part that we come to is abstract method. What is an abstract method? An abstract method is a method which has no body. Secondly, the abstract method must always be declared in the abstract class. How abstract method and class are declared? By using the keyword abstract. So now you need to see that when we create an abstract class and an abstract method, they contains no body. That is, there is no execution or implementation which takes place. The execution and the implementation part will be used or will be created in another class that will inherit the abstract class. So we will see the programming fundamental of how to create an abstract class and an abstract method. Again, one more question arises over here, why we need an abstract class and an abstract method. So the reason is because we want to create an abstract layer for our class and method. This is the best approach to do it. So now you can see, first of all, we are creating an abstract class. After that, we are creating an abstract method, abstract void display. So just we have declared the method. We have not defined any body. So now you can say it is an abstract method. Now once again, we will create a class, public class, let us say my class. Inside this, we will do extends demo. So now the implementation, that is the implementation of abstract class is done. Again, Now we will redefine the abstract method void display and provide some execution to it. So now we can write, let us say I will directly print that it is an abstract method. Now again, in order to call the method, we need to define the main method. So we can just directly write public static void main. Inside it we can directly define string args and we can call the method. Since it is a non-static method, we need to declare it by creating an object. So now we will create an object. Firstly, we will write the abstract class name obj. After that, I will write new keyword, but then I can use the class name which is inheriting my abstract class, that is, you can say my class. So now you can say my class extends demo, that is why to create an object for the demo class, I can use this class name over here. Now I need to invoke the method. Invoke means call method. That is an abstract method which was re-implemented. So I will write obj dot display. So now let us see how it will execute. Okay, so let me debug the program. First, after debugging my program, you can see I need to put parentheses for defining my method, and then after execution the output is provided, that is abstract method. So now you can see that my abstract method and my abstract class can be inherited into another class, and my method that does not have any body can be redefined to perform some function. That is for abstract class and method. Moving on to the next part, that is constructors. Constructors in Java is a special type of method that is used to initialize the object. So we studied methods, now we will study about constructors. The first thing we need to understand over here, constructor is actually a method, but it is a special type of method which is used to initialize the object. Its only responsibility is to initialize objects. Now it is invoked at the time of object creation. That is, we don't need to invoke them separately. They will be automatically invoked at the time of object creation. We'll look onto the programming aspect as well. It constructs the values, that is, provide data for the object. That is why it is known as a constructor. To create, and first an object is created. After that, the data is provided to the object. Now the data is actually provided by constructor. The two rules for constructor are, their name must be same as a class name. Secondly, they should not have any explicit return data type, because they are not designed to return some value. They are just used or designed to initialize the objects. Again, the types of Java constructor. There are two types, default constructor and parameterized constructor. We'll be discussing both. But first, we will look on to the programming aspect of defining a very simple kind of constructor. Let me create a class over here. Let me create a class bike. Now, I will create a constructor for this class. So the first rule to define a constructor is it should have the same name as a class name. So my constructor name should be bike only, and it should not contain any return data type. So I will just define the system.out.print function over here, that we are just simply printing a constructor. Again, the first thing, we created a constructor. The name is same as the class name. I just provided a function to it to print the word constructor. Now we will execute, or we will run the constructor. Now how to run the constructor? In order to run the constructor, we should first of all go to the main method. So again, I am going to the main method. Inside my main method, now I should create an object for the class bike. Let us say I am creating an object bike, obj is equals to new Again I am creating a bike. As simple as possible. So now you can see that I created an object over here, but at the time of object creation only, my constructor is called automatically. This means we know there's no need to separately call my method, that is constructor. It will be called automatically when we are creating an object, because you can see this bike double parenthesis is just similar to the constructor we are creating over here. This is something we need to identify. Now let us try to execute the program. So now you can see the word constructor is displayed over here. So just as soon as the object is created, my constructor is invoked at the same time. Now the second thing to discuss over here is parameterized constructor. So now you can see, you saw this constructor over here. Now we will create a parameterized constructor. So now let us see how we'll create a parameterized constructor. So let us discuss the construction of a parameterized constructor. I have just created a body. So first thing we need to define is a class. So let us define a class student. For a student, there are two important things: roll number and their name. That is the roll number or student ID and their name. So we will create a constructor for the same, but before it, we will define two variables over here. Let us say string ID, int ID and string name. Now both of these variables are actually instance variables because they do not have any static keyword associated to them. So now in order to create a constructor, again we will write the keyword class name, that is student. In it, I will pass two variables. Let us say int I and string n. I is for ID, n is for name. Inside it, I will directly copy the value of I to ID, that is the student ID. Secondly, I will directly copy the value of n to student name. So this is how you can see my constructor is created. Let me directly write this comment over here. So let us discuss first. First of all, we created two variables, int id, string name. These are instance variable. Then we created a parameterized constructor over here, student, int I, string n, in which we are assigning the value I to id and n to name. Then what we will do is that we will create a method in which we will display the both of these values. So now again, let us create the method over here. So I will define my method. Let us say void display. Now in this, I will display the values of my employment of my student ID and its name. So again, system.out. Let us write print ln. Now roll number and name is plus, let us give me a space, plus ID plus what is the name. Again, after some space, we will provide the name. So this is a method again I have created. Now I will go to my main method and I will do object creation. Again, what is my class name over here? Student. Now I will again define an object obj, new keyword, and again I will write class name. But now there will be one difference, that is we created a parameterized constructor. In this we provided two arguments. Now the same arguments will be defined when we will create an object for the same. So let us say I am defining roll number 12 and I am writing a name, let us say Peter. So now this is how the object will be different for the same. Again, we are defined object 1. Now again, let me define object, another object. So let us name this object as obj1. Let us name this object as obj2. And now I will change the roll number Now let me change the name also. So now you can see we can define two objects. Both of these objects will contain different values for the same constructor I have created. Now with the objects that we have created, we will call the method of display. obj1.display and obj2.display. Likewise, so obj1.display will display which values 12 and Peter, while obj2.display will display what values 13 and Elsa. So now you can see that when we create a parameterized constructor, the first difference to understand is the object that we are creating. At the time of object creation only, we need to provide the parameters. Secondly, using the objects, we can call the same method twice, and both times the values will be printed differently depending on the object. Like for object 1, value will be 12 and Peter. For object 2, value will be 13 and Elsa. So now we will try to execute the program. So let us try to execute the program over here. So now you can see roll number and name is 12 Peter, roll number and name is 13 Elsa. So both of the objects are displaying different values, but you can see over here the constructors were invoked. That is, constructor is invoked only when we created the object. The display method was invoked separately when we used object.display because the method is separately declared from the constructor. So you can see the values were assigned at the time of object creation and the method was called by using the particular objects. So this example shows us the parameterized constructor, how to use it, how to create different objects with it, and how to use the different objects to call the same method. So this example was discussed in the coding fundamentals, which shows us the parameterized constructor. Moving on to the next part, that is constructor overloading. Constructor overloading means we can define multiple constructors in the class. The different constructors can have different variables, that is different arguments for them, and different objects should be created for each one of the constructor. So let us look how we can do it in the coding fundamental. We'll discuss the same example over here. So now you saw we defined a constructor 1. So let us name this constructor as 1. Again we will define another constructor over here. Let us say the second constructor. Let us directly copy paste the constructor over here, but now we will change the declaration of the constructor. The constructor is same because the name is the same as the class name, but we are providing another variable to it. Let us say int marks, int m, and then marks will be assigned to m. So now you can see my constructor 2 has 3 input arguments over here: int I for student ID, name n, and marks m. But for my constructor 1 there was only int I and string n. That is why it is known as constructor overloading. Same constructor defined twice but different arguments. So now you can say, let us say obj1 will belong to constructor 1, but obj2 will belong to constructor 2. So we need to add marks also over here. Let us say I'm assigning marks of 50. So it will invoke constructor 2. So the second constructor will be invoked over here, and we have provided extra over here again. But now since in void.display we assigned just only ID and name, but we need to assign marks also in order to print the marks over here. So we will separately write the command That is, we can just directly mention what are the marks that are allotted. So now you can see that how the same same constructor name, that is a class name, can be used to create different constructors. Let us try to execute the program. Yes, so for the first constructor you can see the output roll number is 12 and Peter. Marks is 0 because the default value for marks is 0 and we have not assigned any value for constructor 1, but for constructor 2 we assigned a value of 50 and in the output you can see that it is showing us as 50. This is known as constructor overloading as provided in this example. Then the other part that comes is Java copy constructor. Java copy constructor is nothing but when we are creating two constructors, that is, we are using constructor overloading. In one constructor, we are assigning integer id and string n, that is the name and the roll number, but in the other constructor, we are passing an object. The object is passed so that the values of the object can be copied to another constructor. That is why it is known as a copy constructor. In the same example, let us go to the same example. Now you see how we defined one constructor over here. For the other constructor, we will make it as a copy constructor. That is, the constructor number 2 now will be made as a copy constructor. So the first rule to create a copy constructor is that as an input argument, we should provide the object. So how we will provide the object? By writing class name and by providing a variable name. In this variable, our object will be stored. Now, id will be equal to object name dot variable name. Name will be equal to object name dot variable name. So what is the original name of the variable? You can see id and name. So id is equals to s dot id, name is equals to s dot name. Now here inside the other object 2, now we will pass the object 1. That is, the object 1 values will be copied onto object 2 through copy constructor. So we will comment out the line for marks since we are not using the marks for right now, and let us try to execute the same program. So now you can see roll number and name is 12 and Peter, roll number and name is 12 Peter. So now we can see for object 1 and object 2 we are getting the same values because of the copy constructor over here. So this was about the copy constructor, the Java copy constructor. These are different examples that are provided over here: default no argument constructor, parameterized constructor, and copy constructor.